In today's video, I'm going to show you how I make lazy sourdough loaves. Even if I have to leave the house during the day, it still works out. Welcome to Family Homesteading of West Texas. We are a homeschooling homesteading family of 9. We grow, cook, and preserve most of our food from scratch. Hello, I'm back. I'm Annie. I'm the content creator for our channel, Family Homesteading in West Texas. And I know it's been a while. I haven't been on here lately. But as much as I like sharing on YouTube, that is not my top priority. You know what is? I'll explain. So we are born-again Christians. We're Bible believers. Every word in the Bible is true. So we believe all of that. Even those passages that don't get practiced as much anymore. In Titus 2, it talks about a woman being a housekeeper, loving her husband and children. So that's exactly what my top priority is, taking care of my family. So what does that look like for me? Well, first of all, it's important for me to give my family the emotional support that they need, being there for them. And then it's also important for me to keep a clean, comfortable place for them to live in, keeping them fed, not only to fill their tummies, but also making sure that the food I'm putting on the table is nutritious enough for their growing bodies to become healthy adults. So that being said, the feeding part and taking care of the nutrients, that takes up, I guess, quite a bit of time. Making sure that your food is nutrient enough is quite a challenge, but it's very doable, especially when you're home most of the time, like I am usually. I enjoy it and it's very doable, and I know that I've gotten better at it with time. But recently there was a time where I had to leave the house early in the morning and I wouldn't be back till like late in the afternoon. So that really was a challenge for me, especially bread baking. I could cook all sorts of meals uh, when I get back home, but bread baking, especially using sourdough and freshly milled flour, that just felt like it was quite a challenge or not even possible. But using store-bought flour or yeast in my bread, that just wasn't an option in my way of thinking because of the lack of nutrients in the store-bought flour compared to freshly milled. So I did a little bit of researching, digging, and a lot of thinking and praying. And I must say that I've got a solution to the problem. I'm still able to make bread even if I have to leave the house early in the morning, come back mid-afternoon. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity for people who are going to work in the morning, coming back late in the day, for them to have an opportunity to have home-baked bread. So I thought it was a good idea to share this on here. This bread is not like picture perfect. This is a bread that's easy to make. It still looks good. It's not picture perfect, but it looks good, and it's delicious and nutritious, and that's exactly what I'm after. So let me show you what I'm doing. So I am starting off with milling some hard white wheat berries using my Nutri-Mill stone mill, and I absolutely like my mill. Although I have to adjust it every time I'm milling wheat berries, just about every time. And also, if I were to use it for soft white wheat berries, I would have adjusted it differently. So I'm just adjusting it every time I'm using it, and they'll make nice fine flour. So all this, I would do it in the morning before I'm leaving the house. I would start my sourdough starter using the freshly milled flour I just milled. Just mixing some flour and water together, making a nice paste. I never measure. And then I'm taking my little jar from the fridge and I'm adding about 2 teaspoons of the sourdough starter that has been in the fridge for about probably a week. It hasn't been fed for a week. And then I'm feeding back the amount that I took out. And I'm always making sure that I take out more from the jar than I leave in, because you want to feed back more than what's in the jar. And then I'll just give it a good stir, put the lid on there, and back in the fridge it goes. And then I'll just mix the sourdough starter very nice into my paste that I just made. And my sourdough starter is a very established starter, so I know that I'm not going to hurt my starter by just leaving it out on the counter for the day. So after this, I'm just leaving it and I'm leaving the house. And then when I get back home in the mid-afternoon, I'll see some bubbles, maybe quite a bit of bubbles, and I will feed my sourdough starter 2 or 3 cups of flour, and then just adding water. I do not measure, just adding enough water for it to become a nice paste. I don't like my sourdough starter to be too thin. I just like it nice and thick. Just making sure I'm not leaving any clumps in there, giving it a very good stir. I know that my starter is already very active, but at this time, after an hour or two, it'll be super active because it's just gonna be super fast to eat the fresh food that I just fed to it. So how active your starter is could rely a lot on how established your starter is and also how warm your house is. So then just before I'm going to bed, I'm going to actually make the dough. And the recipe, I will type it out in the description box, but I'm putting the hot water in the oil, which in this case I'm using pork lard. I'm putting that together in the bowl. I'm also adding the honey at this time because the honey is usually a little bit harder to melt as well. And I do a little bit of an eye measurement on the honey, but I'll type out the complete recipe in the description box for you to read it. And then after the honey and the fat has melted completely, I'm adding the cold water because it would be too hot like this. I'm also adding the salt at this time. And then I'll just give it a little stir, and then I'm ready to add the flour. I would usually never measure or weigh my flour, but I did weigh it out for this dough. But at this time, I'm just adding enough to make like a nice paste, and then I am ready to add the sourdough starter to the dough. And I've also made this bread using hard red wheat berries, so you can use any type of wheat berries you really want, but you want a hard berry. So I am not measuring how much of the sourdough starter. I'm just putting it all in, the whole jar full. And I don't know how much exactly it is, but I did measure the flour when I was making the sourdough starter. And after I have the sourdough starter well incorporated, I'm also adding some baking soda that helps with the taste. My family is a little bit picky on if it is too sour, they wouldn't eat it. So baking soda helps with that. And then when it gets hard enough, I'm just getting my hands in there and I will just knead that dough, which is for me also very, very satisfying. I have a mixer, I have a KitchenAid mixer, but for the most part, most of my doughs would be too big for it. And I'm just rather mixing it by hand, kneading it, and having a bigger dough. That way I wouldn't have to make bread every day. And just like that, the dough is finished. I would just put the lid on there and I would just leave it out overnight. No stretch and folds or anything, but our house is a little bit cooler during the night. So the next morning I have my bowl full of bubbles and it's very, very active. So I am ready to shape this dough into loaves. And I would just use a little bit of flour if the dough is a little bit sticky. Just sprinkle a little bit of flour on top of it. And then I'll just divide it equally as I can anyways, into 8 pieces. So all this, I am doing this in the morning before I leave the house. I'm getting up earlier than everybody else. And then I would just start
shaping loaves right away so that they have a little bit of time later on before I put them in the oven, and they will be done before I actually leave the house. And then I would just start shaping them. I am not super picky that I have like a perfect shape, but I would just roll them till I see that the shape is nice. And sometimes I would score them, other times I won't. This is completely optional, but it just adds a little fun to the bread baking to see the scores on there. And then I would start preheating my oven. I put it on 325 Fahrenheit, and then I would just put the loaves on top of the oven, because the top gets a little bit warm when the oven actually gets warm. And I ended up putting a towel over top. And after just 15 minutes, I could already see that they have risen quite a bit. And then I would just put them in the oven, and I would bake them for about 45 minutes. It depends how large your loaves are, but if you do 8 loaves like I do, they're quite small, and in 45 minutes they're going to be done. So in the meantime, while the bread was baking, I was getting ready to leave the house, and I have my bread done before I actually leave the house. So I like to put my loaves on a cooling rack and just let them cool completely. So I'd let them cool down until I get back home mid-afternoon, and then I would actually put them in the freezer. Putting them in the freezer is the way to keep them fresh, and that is why I bake in bulk. I like to slice them up before I put them in the freezer. It's just a lot easier for me to defrost them later on. So now we have fresh bread, nutritious bread. When we need it, it's right there. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Bye.